Louisiana Chemical Association and the Chemical Industry Alliance. We represent chemical manufacturers in Louisiana, the major chemical companies, and we also represent our vendors and suppliers. That's people who do business with the chemical industry. Today is our annual legislative conference. We do this every May. We talk about legislative issues that may or may not impact the chemical industry, and we also talk about where we're going in the future, what we're going to look like in terms of jobs and projects. Today is a special day because we've got Dr. Lawrence Scott's coming in. He did an updated survey to find out what's actually the impact, the fiscal impact of the chemical industry on Louisiana.
If you go to any Rotary Club, statewide Rotary Club meeting, or say a statewide Chamber of Commerce meeting, look around the room, one of every 7 people that are employed, one of every 7 people in that room are employed because of the existence of the chemical industry here. If you go to a statewide meeting, for example, of the PTA, kind of look around the room, 4 out of every 10 teachers in that room, their salaries are paid because of the existence of the chemical industry here. So we're very, very fortunate to have it. If you want to get a good idea of what it would be like without it, just go one state to the east.
Louisiana Chemical Association is really trying to make sure that we have the right environment to grow the industry and be able to do that in a fashion that's obviously safe, reliable for communities.
When you think about the chemical industry, a good way helpful way for me to think about it is you think of the chemical industry being this big rock, and we're going to drop this rock into a pond called the Louisiana economy. And when it hits that pond, it's going to create positive ripple effects throughout the economy. When people, say at the ExxonMobil chemical plant here, receive their pay, they're going to go spend it at grocery stores and car dealerships and movie theaters, and those people's income goes up, so they then go out and spend more money at movie theaters and car dealerships, et cetera. What we call the old ripple effect or the multiplier effect. So what I want to focus on first is just to show you the size of the rock that's going to hit that pond, and it is a big sucker. The chemical industry is the largest manufacturing employer in the state, 29,109 jobs. You'll notice that that number has an asterisk beside it, and I'll explain why the asterisk is there in just a second. About 1/5 of the manufacturing jobs in the state come from the chemical industry, and the number 2, the distant number 2, is the fabricated metals industry at 17,042 people. Now the reason I put an asterisk beside that is because the direct employment in the chemical industry in this state is grossly, not a little bit, it is grossly understated. And the reason it is grossly understated is because of the contractor issue. And for those of you in the Baton Rouge area, this is a very important issue when it comes to dealing with Together Baton Rouge. Together Baton Rouge folks, if I wanted to know what the veil means in Paul's letter to the church at Corinth, or if I wanted to know what the horse means or the glass water means in the book of Revelation, I would go to preachers to find that out. They've been to divinity school. I wouldn't go to an economist. When it comes to economic issues, I don't go to preachers to ask them how the economy's doing. I'm sorry, I just don't do that. I think they have every right to speak, but their use of numbers is just so grossly wrong that it's appalling to me. And the contractor issue is a key issue of this, because one of the arguments Together Baton Rouge has made is that employment in the chemical industry in our area, for example, has been falling over time. Let me show you what's been happening. By the way, this has been happening in all the United States. If you look at ExxonMobil's big chemical plant here, in 1979, there were 2,200 people working at that plant. And every one of them had on an ExxonMobil shirt. And as a result, because they had on an ExxonMobil shirt, they were counted in the manufacturing sector. Today, there's actually 2,203 people out there, but only 1,003 have on an ExxonMobil shirt. The 1,200 of them have on a Performance Contractors or a Turner Industries or a Cajun Industries shirt, and they are counted in construction, not in manufacturing. And so this supposed decline, and by the way, they're out there at that plant, they're working 24 hours a day, 365, because they are necessary to take natural gas and make chemicals out of it, but they're not counted in manufacturing. It is a fake decline. And if you don't understand the contractor issue, you're not going to understand what the heck is going on out there. Now, a matter of fact, of Exxon's 3 chemical plants in East Baton Rouge Parish, basically half are contractors. And it makes it look like, hey, their employment has declined. Their employment hasn't declined. People just changed shirts. That's all that happened there. And by the way, the nature of your industry, the nature of the chemical industry, you drive to the airport here and look off the side, there are all these pipes and plants and stuff sticking up, which means you need even more contractors. When you go to a fabricator, like Bollinger Fabrication or Gulf Island Fabricators, they don't have all that stuff sticking up. They don't have hardly any contractors, right? You go to a textile mills don't have any contractors. This is a huge issue for refining and chemical side, because you have so much stuff that has to be taken care of, and so the contractor issue is absolutely huge. So it's by the way, it's no coincidence Together Baton Rouge jumps on this issue, because it makes their argument look good. Sometimes there are coincidences, sometimes there's not. The distribution of this employment across the state. If you look at the top 6 parishes in terms of, look at Calcasieu Parish. Excuse me, Calcasieu Parish has nearly 5,000 people employed. And of course, that number is about to pop way up, right? It's about to pop way up, because once the Sasol plant is finished, and once the actually Al-Ladi plant is finished, you're going to see these numbers go up. Ascension at 4,000, Eberville at 34, East Baton Rouge at 3,100, et cetera. What you'll find is that 53 out of the 64 parishes in the state have at least some chemical employment. What you'll see here is that for the most part, this is heavily located in the southern part of the state, especially on the Mississippi River, from the Old Bridge down to the mouth of the Mississippi River, then over to Calcasieu Parish. And the primary reason for that, as you well know, you remember the main thing that's the number one thing being produced are basic chemicals, the first stage chemicals, and many of them made for exports. And you want to be able to transport those suckers. Well, the Mississippi River and the Calcasieu Ship Channel provide that. Now, you'll find some up here in Rapides, and you'll find in Ouachita, and you'll find some in the northwestern corner. Up here, you'll find mainly this is made up of a large number of smaller chemical firms, but still, this is still important up there. I think in this particular area up here, there's like 1,500 people employed in the chemical industry, and here it's almost 1,000 in Ouachita. Many of these are associated with helping the ag sector out. And of course, in the Rapides Parish area, you have Procter & Gamble and then Plasti-Pak, which makes the stuff that Procter & Gamble puts their stuff in. On the earnings side, these are not only jobs, a lot of jobs, but they are some of the best paying jobs in the economy. What you'll find if you watch this over time, these data are the most recent we have, is that these two sectors here, the refinery and the chemical industry, fight with each other for who pays the most. And quite often, it's very, very close, as you can see there. Second largest payer, as it turns out, the average wage in manufacturing is $13.46 compared to 2000. It's 52% higher than the average wage in manufacturing. Average wage in Louisiana is $870 a week. And so as you can see here, it's 136% higher than that. So very, very good paying jobs. If you look at the average wage in manufacturing versus the average wage in chemicals over time, you'll find that chemicals have just been growing nice and steady. The difference between the two is about 52%, and that percentage hasn't changed very much, but as you can see, the gap between the two has changed over time. So it's nice, steady, upward growing wage rates. According to the data put out by the Department of Labor, $2.9 billion are paid out in 2017. Now, I took the quartered numbers and multiplied it by 4. So about $2.9 billion in total wages. That's the highest of any sector in the state. So just a little bit higher than oil and gas extraction, a good bit higher than refining, as it turns out. But once again, I want to point out, let's see if it says so down here. It does not include contractor wages. If you put the contractor wages in here, I mean, my guess is this number is going to be well north of $4 billion, okay? So this is an extremely important industry to our state. And once again, if you look at the distribution of earnings, they are distributed about the same way the jobs are, heavily in the southern part of the state, along the Mississippi River and the Calcasieu Ship Channel. I mean, look at these numbers for the individual parishes. I mean, in Calcasieu Parish, more than $500 million just in wages are paid out in this sector. Not the multiplier effect, but just in this sector. Ascension Parish, almost $500 million. And then you can see the others in Iberville, East Baton Rouge, $1/3 billion, St. Charles, $1/4 billion, et cetera. So these are just enormous, enormous numbers for us. What I just described to you was the rock, okay, the size rock. Did you see? It is a big sucker. It is a big rock. Now what I want to show you is what happens when you add to that rock the multiplier effect, the ripple effects. In terms of business sales, these data for 2017, almost $80 billion in business sales are created in our state because of the existence of your industry. Household earnings, almost $16 billion. Basically, 1 out of every $9 earned in the state can be traced back to the existence of the chemical industry here. About 12.4% of all earnings in Louisiana. 267,000 jobs. Basically, if you go to a lobby meeting, you go to a statewide Rotary meeting, you go to a Chamber of Commerce, statewide Chamber of Commerce meeting, look around the room. Every 7th person in that room owes their job to the presence of your industry in the state. The average wage over all the jobs that are created, if you take this 15.7 billion divided by this number, you're going to get 58.6, which is well above, more than $10,000, $13,000 above the average wage in the state. So once again, these are not only good jobs, but they are very, very good jobs. Has a job multiplier 9.2. Now our firm does a lot of multiplier studies, a lot of impact studies for all different kinds of industries. This is a very large impact. Normally, what happens when we see a number like this is we tell the team, go back and see if you made a math error. But what you need to understand is that the number that we're dividing into the total jobs here is grossly understated because of the contractors. If you put the contractors in there, that multiplier number is going to turn out to be something like probably closer to 5, okay? But the reason it is so high, and you might first say this is too high to be believable, is because it doesn't include the contractors. The contractors are built into the multiplier effect, and that's what makes it so high. So every time there is a new job created in the chemical industry, there's 8.2 jobs created elsewhere in the state. When you look at state taxes, some tricky things involved in estimating the state tax collections. We do have data from the Department of Revenue on corporate franchise and income taxes collected, about 3.4 million. We have absolutely no data on the direct sales taxes you pay to the state. We just don't have any way of collecting that. And the state doesn't have any way of breaking that out. We know that number is big because you buy big stuff, okay? When you look at the indirect taxes, remember that $15.4 billion in earnings? When people go out and spend that money, it creates taxes for the state. The state collects about 7 cents off of every new dollar created, of income created in the state. And so you're responsible for almost $1.1 billion here in indirect taxes collected, a total of $1.1 billion. And to give you a kind of a reference point, if you look at all the money the state collects from gaming and tobacco taxes, I'm not talking gaming, I'm talking about the land-based casinos, the riverboat casinos, the lottery, the video poker. Basically what you've done is you've generated an amount of money that's basically equivalent to that. When you look at the local government tax effects, now this is pretty important because this is where it is believed that you don't do anything. You'd be surprised at the number of people in this parish that thinks ExxonMobil doesn't pay any property taxes. They just think you don't pay any property taxes at all because the opponents have been very clever in the way they have made their message. Actually, we just got through doing some work, and I don't want to keep referring to ExxonMobil all the time, but it's kind of important to note this. ExxonMobil last year paid $32 million in property taxes just in this parish. There is no other parish in the state where one company writes out a check that size, $32 million. The next to them is Entergy, and Entergy is a fairly distant second on that. It's down around 20 or so. But if you look at the property taxes collected, we were able to document at least $175 million in property taxes that local governments receive from your industry. Now you'll notice that it has an asterisk on it. And the reason it has an asterisk on it is because we relied on a survey of your membership, and surveys were not complete in terms of being filled out. I also did a survey of the major parishes in the southern part of the state where these industries were located. And so we know this is very much of an understatement, okay? It's a much bigger number than that. But if you take the property taxes and then the indirect taxes collected, we're talking about local governments receiving another $1 billion. And to give you a reference point, if you go to a statewide PTA meeting, again, look around the room. 4 out of every 10 teachers in that room owes their salary to the presence of this industry in the state. You want to get a good look at what our state would look like without the chemical industry or the energy industry, okay? All you have to do is look one state to the east.
The industrial tax exemption program is basically a program where you get tax abatement for a set period of time, manufacturers do, and this is to encourage large capital investment projects. Everybody's familiar with, for example, Sasol had a project over in Lake Charles that they're doing, about $1 billion project. We just recently had Formosa announce one in St. James Parish, where they're going to invest $9 billion with the B in St. James. All of it is made possible because of the incentive programs that the state have, and everything that goes along with that. So the industrial property tax exemption program allows for that to happen because it helps to equalize the competition across the Southeast and across the country for Louisiana.
What has happened to that program in the last several years?
Well, in 2016, the governor came in and by executive order, he changed the program. The program was traditionally for 10 years, 2 5-year contracts at 100%. The governor came in and he changed that. He went 5 years and 3 years, so he reduced it to 8. And then the first 5 years are at 100%. The second 3 years are less than that, somewhere around 75%. He also added in there that the locals have to approve it now. So you have to go through local approval, which could be cumbersome at times. The issue with the executive order is that the locals were not ready to handle that. So it kind of stymied economic development, and that's the thing we want to stay away from. And so hopefully we'll do some things to fix that.
It's actually a very crucial tool for Louisiana to be able to attract new projects, as well as allow existing companies to continue to grow in the state.
The ITEP. If you look at the ITEP that is in force right now, there's about $89 billion worth of this that's in force. And as it turns out, the chemical industry is made up of the majority of that. About 71% of the industrial tax exemptions that have been given are in this industry. However, somebody mentioned this in the panel. We really should think of this as a tax deferment program, not a tax exemption program. All you're doing is deferring when you start paying taxes. If you look at the amount of property that's getting ready to come on the tax rolls over the next 5 years, just from the chemical side, $14.6 billion. If you look at a place like Iberville Parish, Iberville Parish is about to say, this is not an M, by the way, that is a B. There's $4.3 billion in property that's going to come on the tax rolls in Iberville Parish over the next 5 years. Cameron Parish is 1.8. Well, let me tell you something about Cameron Parish. Okay, Cameron Parish things are just starting to happen in Cameron Parish because of LNG export terminals. But that number is getting ready to really skyrocket. East Baton Rouge Parish, $1.8 billion in new property about to come on the roll. Ascension Parish, 1.5, Calcasieu, 1.3, St. Charles, 1.1. So as you can see, there's a lot of property getting ready to be able to be taxed. And the kind of interesting thing here is I took the top 8 parishes in terms of the value of exemptions as of 2017. So here they all are in alphabetical order. And here's what the rank is. Cameron Parish has the highest because right now Cameron Parish has the largest capital investment probably in the history of our state, and that's the Cheniere LNG, was a $20 billion project. And then you have the Cameron LNG project in there. That's why their number is so high here. But what you will find, if you look at the property tax, does this hurt property tax collections? Okay, look at property tax collections per person. Property tax collections per person, these numbers here, if you see where they rank in the top 22 out of 64 parishes. You're collecting a lot of property taxes despite the fact that you have this exemption. And in many of these parishes, if you look at the percent paid by business, in most of them, more than 50% of the property taxes are being paid by business, not by individuals. The exceptions to that are Ascension Parish, and I think East Baton Rouge, which are very, very populous parishes, a lot of houses, a lot of individual people that are paying taxes there. But you look at a place like Calcasieu, 70% of the property taxes in that parish are paid by business, not by individuals. And very important for what was in the front page, or not the front page, but in the paper today, is if you look at teacher salaries, you think, well, the teacher salaries are really being hurt by the fact we have these industrial tax exemptions. Precisely the opposite is the case. When you look at these 8 parishes, with only 2 exceptions, they're all in the top 15 to 16 in terms of teacher salaries. This is where, if you look in Ascension and East Baton Rouge Parish and Iberville Parish, their teachers are paid $2,000 a year more than the statewide average, not less than the statewide average. The only exceptions to this are Cameron, which is weird, again, because Cameron is very early on, and there's, how many people are in Cameron Parish? About the size of my subdivision. I think something like that. There's hardly anybody in that parish, so things are kind of weird there. St. John the Baptist, I can't explain that to you. I don't know why their teacher salaries. Now, the teacher salaries is not that different from the statewide average, but they are 36. For the most part, the ones where you're getting all the hassle and all the problems are in the parishes where teachers are actually paid more than the statewide average. Now, what I've showed you is what has happened, but what is going on here is like nothing I've ever seen in the history of watching the state, again, for 4 decades. And that is this huge industrial expansion that's going on. I'll list all these projects in the report that's available to you. There are $160 billion in announced chemical projects in our state. These are announcements since 2012. Of those, about $70 billion are underway or completed. We have about $90 billion worth of projects that have been announced but have not started going vertical yet. That's a very important number to remember. They have not started going vertical yet. This is not a good time to be fiddling around with the ITEP. This is a bad time to be fiddling around. We have a lot at stake. We don't have $300 million at stake. We have $89 billion at stake. Now, what are the threats to this? The biggest threat to us is Texas, right? I mean, that's who we're really competing with for most of these projects. Texas brings everything that we bring to the table. They bring natural gas, the accessibility to natural gas. They bring the pipelines. They bring access to the Gulf of Mexico so you can ship this stuff out. They bring everything we do, except look what they have. Look at their business climate compared to us. We have got to do something about that. We have got to do something about that. That is killing us, especially killing the industry that Chris John is particularly involved in. Transportation, higher ed, K through 12, we are below Texas. And in addition to that, Texas has no personal corporate income tax, no tax on manufacturing equipment, no tax on manufacturing inputs, a unified sales tax collection, lower local taxes. They do have a gross receipts tax similar to our franchise tax, but frankly, that one is very much under attack. This is a lot to overcome. We have got to have something like the ITEP to offset all these things. That's just the bottom line. We're not competing with Alabama and Mississippi and Florida. We're competing with this state directly to the west. And if you don't keep that in your head, and you go down to the city council and say, well, they got the river, they got to come here, well, that is nonsense. You look at where ExxonMobil's been putting their latest new investments, okay? They're looking at one here, but most of it's been going over there. Because right now, the ITEP means exactly this, right? Somewhere in the bowels of every one of these firms, there's an accountant. That's where you put the accountants, by the way. And it's basically a matter of math, right? They're figuring the rate of return on equity here versus Texas. It's basically math. They have stockholders they have to satisfy. They have no choice in this matter. And so one of the threats, as I point out here, is what's going on with the ITEP. Fortunately, they're looking at this again. Well, there's two kind of fortunate things. Of the 90 billion in potential projects, most of them were grandfathered in on the old rules. Most of them were grandfathered in. That's really good news. But somebody that's coming along looking at this now, like the new plastics plant, expansion of the plastics plant here, that's not coming under that. And so these new rules that came under JEB 2016-26, that is a problem for us. Now, I know everybody in this room knows, I think it was talked about here, the new rules are under discussion. And hopefully we're moving to something that's going to be a lot more smooth and a lot more predictable. Predictability is critical in this, okay? Now, the other thing is solving the physical cliff. It might sound, the emphasis on the word sounds good to say, we've got to be fair. We've got to share this problem between business and industry, okay? And that sounds good, but you got to keep in the back of your head that the location decision is a matter of math. To the extent that we raise permanent taxes on business, we are putting $89 billion worth of projects pointing that direction instead of staying here. Okay, we just got to keep that in the back of our heads. It's not like we have 300 million at risk. We have 80 billion, nearly 90 billion at risk. And that's why this discussion is so very, very important. Basically what you'll find is that those parishes that have high levels of ITEP are also parishes where you have some of the highest per capita tax collections. You're going to find that almost all, to say the top 8 parishes that have ITEP awards are among the highest paid teacher salaries in the state. There's a lot of misconceptions about that area. There's always a lot of new property that's coming off of ITEC and then coming on the tax rolls. It's particularly important for East Baton Rouge Parish, and Calcasieu Parish, Ascension Parish. And so it's been, I think, very good for us. And I think the thing for most people to remember is when we talk about ITEP, is that we are constantly in competition with Texas for these facilities. Texas has natural gas, they have pipelines, they have access to the Gulf of Mexico, they have all the things we have, but they don't have a corporate income tax, they don't have a corporate property tax, they don't have a corporate income tax, they have a unified sales tax system, they have a much better legal environment, much better infrastructure, much better education environment. We have got to compete with them, and the ITEP is one of the primary ways we do that.
For many years, the state of Louisiana has used the industrial tax exemption program to help equalize some taxes and do tax abatement to help us in the recruitment of manufacturers throughout the state of Louisiana. And now, in 2016, Governor John Bel Edwards made some changes to that exemption program. And what we're going to ask our panel to do is talk a little bit about how those changes have impacted what they do, their competitiveness maybe in Louisiana versus other states within their own companies.
Everybody, I think, is probably aware of Sasol's investment in Southwest Louisiana, $11 billion cracker and derivatives project. Certainly, it's been the talk of Southwest Louisiana. And we're proud of the fact that that makes us part of the economic engine that is powering Southwest Louisiana and Louisiana as well. That project is going to add over 700 jobs in Southwest Louisiana by the time we're done, and those are the direct Sasol jobs. On top of that, there will be about another 1,500 contractors that will be full-time on the site. During the construction of the project, it will be upwards of 6,000 construction workers for multiple years also working in the area. Of the 700 jobs that we will eventually hire, we've already hired over 600 of those, and we're very proud to say that 90%, actually a little more than 90% of those new employees were hired from Louisiana, and a big percentage of them from Calcasieu Parish. So again, it's really an economic engine driving Southwest Louisiana. And we're happy that we're able to deliver on the Louisiana First effort that we've put into this whole thing. When we get the plants up and running, we will have about 2,600 people that work on that site on a daily basis, which includes close to 1,000 that we have now. All the attention goes to the new jobs, but the existing jobs are there as well, and we become a pretty significant employer in the Calcasieu Parish area. And we think that's important. We've been there for 20 years, and we want to be there for a whole lot longer than that. And this kind of expansion gives Louisiana the opportunity to have long-term economic development and jobs that come with good benefits. So this is something that is very important to the economy. I think we'll hear more about that later today in the meeting. But we're here this morning to talk about the ITEP program. And the fact of the matter is, without that, there's a good chance that Sasol wouldn't have chosen Southwest Louisiana as a place to locate this facility. All of the companies that you see represented in the room this morning, we're global companies. We have sites all over the world, and we have the opportunity to buy sites all over the world. And so it really comes down to an economic decision for the company as to where you're going to locate. And in our case, the industrial tax exemption, which when we entered into it, was 100% exemption for 10 years, was a big factor in determining that we would locate in Louisiana. Louisiana has a lot of advantages aside from the tax exemption, access to feedstock, infrastructure, and things like that, but so does Texas. I mean, let's be honest about that. And so the company, we could have located an ethane cracker closer to Mount Bellevue if we located in Texas. And so it really comes down to where's the company going to make the most money. And so programs like industrial tax exemption are extremely important in helping us make those kinds of decisions. And I wouldn't be lying to you to tell you that in looking through where we were going to locate this big project, we had options that we could have done things all over the world, but we also had internal options within Sasol. And it really came down to the wire in the decision, because we were considering a site in Canada as well. And it was right down to the last minute where we finally made the decision that Louisiana was the right place to locate this. And so the industrial tax exemption is extremely important in keeping Louisiana competitive against all these other sites. A couple of other things that I think are important to note is that LED does a great job of analyzing these projects before they, quote, come to town or they come through with the exemptions. I was very impressed with the thoroughness of the analysis that they did and what the return was going to be for the state of Louisiana. It's not just a giveaway. They looked at it and they determined that this was good for Louisiana and that the exemptions, quote, paid out for the state. And you often hear a lot of people say it's a giveaway, and it's not, because the state gets back more than they, quote, exempted. But you also have to remember that if the plants don't come to Louisiana, you haven't exempted anything. That there was going to be no tax revenue, period, if the plant doesn't come at all. And so we're very supportive of the LED and the analysis that they do and the business acumen that they bring to that part of it. Finally, the last point I think I want to make is that it's the people in this room that can really help make the difference. We have to make sure that everyone is aware of how important this program is to the state of Louisiana. Now, I'm not, you can probably tell, maybe not, from my accent, that I'm not from Louisiana. I'm originally from the Midwest. but I've lived in Louisiana now 25 of the last 30 years, and it's a fantastic place. My wife and I fully intend to retire in Louisiana. Best people we've ever met. Please don't say that around my family. But the people in Louisiana are fantastic, and it's a great place to live. But it isn't going to be a great place to live if the economy goes into the tank. And so I think it's important that what I'll call our partners in the room, our suppliers, our customers, and certainly the contractors that do the construction and the maintenance on our site, engineering, and all those things, understand how important this program is in order to keep this kind of business in Louisiana. Now, I like Southwest Louisiana, but we'll cover the entire state on this one. And so I think it's important that we all understand the issue and that we educate the people that work for us, because having an educated electorate that looks at the issues and understands them and knows where the economic drivers are coming from is the most important way we can get people to contact local and state legislators and make a difference. And so I'd ask that we would ask everybody to get involved in that and make sure that the state realizes that this is an important deal.
The way in which the company looks at investments is very similar to what Paul described. When we look at a large project, we decide first where in the world we want to build it. We have 17 facilities now around the world, all parts of it. And we're evaluating where products will flow, we're evaluating economics, we're evaluating how things may change over time to try to really decide where to go. And after that first view, if you end up in North America, it's as simple as, okay, go build it in the U.S. Gulf Coast. It's not a preference over Texas or Louisiana. It's go evaluate. We have facilities in Texas, we have facilities in Louisiana. Where do we want to go in the Gulf Coast? Because the macroeconomics at that point become very similar, and it gets down to some very detailed analysis of where to go. And then, as Paul says, when you have sites already, the ease of adding assets are at a lower cost basis. So it really gets down to these type of incentive programs that really give us a big difference in how we evaluate it. And maybe the part around certainty we don't always talk about. Just like all these companies, we do sensitivity analysis on every one of the factors that drive our financials. Historically, the incentives have been one of the things we could count on. And we looked at it a certain way, where pricing, it will move around, customer demand will move around over the lifespan of these projects. The incentives were viewed as fairly certain. Well, that's changed over the last several years. And the more they're being discussed and going to the table, the more we wonder, are the rules of the game going to change along the time period of our investment? And so not only do the actual number matters, getting to a place that investors can count on what Louisiana would bring to the table, I think really matters. Probably the other point I'll make is to not underestimate what it means when the regional headquarters for companies are in a certain state. Yeah, we're based in Houston regionally. Our headquarters are in the Netherlands and in London. But just like we sit here, there's people in Texas sitting there talking to people at very senior levels about why investing in Texas is there. So you have to come to the table with a very clear value proposition around why here, there. And the ITEP has been, I think, a huge advantage to Louisiana historically, and I hope to see it stay that way as we go forward. So the last part is, even though I've been away from Louisiana a long time, I am a Louisiana native from Lake Charles, where you're building those nice plants. And I really want to see Louisiana continue to grow. And I think the better we can, the state can incent companies like ours to put facilities here, it really matters. Because people who are in this business know the big investment then seeds several small investments that are not in that initial number. And if you miss the very large ones, you miss decades worth of other investment that are tougher to measure and has huge knockoff impacts. So we're really proud to be investing in Geismar. We're in the middle of expansion now. We'll be starting up later this year. We hope a bright view of what we can do in Louisiana, but the stabilizing the incentive programs, ITEP, and having a investment platform that we can count on is going to be critical to whether things end up here or end up somewhere else in the world. So I'll stop there.
Happy to be here to talk about our experience with the ITEP process. Methanex operates 2 methanol plants over in Geismar, and we are considering adding a third plant there. And that would be one of these mega projects that would be $1 billion or more investment, 1,000 or more construction workers, of course, permanent jobs in our plant afterward, and spending a lot of local dollars in Ascension Parish and Louisiana during construction and, of course, after construction. And I stressed the word considering because we just recently went through the ITEP approval process, and there was quite a bit of media coverage. And I think most people don't read articles; they read headlines and the titles on online stories. And I've been congratulated many times on our new plant that we're getting, and of course, people want to do business helping us build our plant. But really, the approval for that project is not going to come for at least another year. So, you'd ask the question, then why did you go through this process in somewhat early 2018? And the reason is mostly due to the changes that occurred a couple of years ago to the ITEP approval process. And I wanted to share a little bit, especially with the manufacturers, if you're considering getting approval on a big project, kind of some pointers that we can provide that helped us get through the process. So you do have to start early. As I mentioned, we're a year ahead of what we call final investment decision, FID. If you have an internal deadline to get an approval, like board approval, to go to the next step of a project, you need to start working on it at least 4 months, probably 6 months ahead of time. What we found was helpful, the change in the process is, of course, getting approval from 3 different governmental entities and then approval by the Commerce and Industry Board and sign off by the governor. We tried to be as open as we could with the information about our project. There are a lot of sensitivities sometimes on these major projects, and companies don't want to put their name on them and use code names like Waterfall or Soaring Eagle or something like that. If at all possible, it's best if you can be upfront about who it is that's making this request. I think it's appreciated by those approval entities and the community itself. Sometimes that's not possible, but would definitely recommend you do that. We were extremely open with the economics and the economic impact to the parish. So we had 2 of our team members who were here, worked a lot of days and nights preparing that. But we provided, both what the positive impact of the parish is, primarily on sales taxes, and then ultimately some property taxes, but also what the exemption was, really to the dollar, and we presented that in PowerPoint presentations. We took the time ahead of official meetings to meet with some of the key leadership of these entities. It's very difficult in a 10 or 15-minute presentation to explain these projects and then request a vote for approval. So we try to give them a little bit of background information and the opportunity to ask a few questions. I think that was helpful. Because we were so early in the process, we don't have a real nailed down capital cost for this project. We know it's on the order of $1 billion. So we gave a range, and actually quite a wide range, of $1.0 to $1.6 billion. And then we adjusted all of the economic analysis for that range to give them a feel for the sensitivity of the impact. I think that's really important, and one of the reasons I think that we're up here at this table addressing LCIA members is that it's very important that those government entities understand the total impact. It's not just to the plants, and we're going to be building a plant and making product and hiring people. We got to build these plants, and $1 billion or $1.5 billion is a whole lot of commerce for our area. So I was really excited. Through one of these milestone meetings, I happened to be in New Zealand on business. And I get a phone call, and it's a colleague and friend, Randy Atuso. I don't know if Randy's here with Cajun Industries, and saying, Glenn, I understand there's y'all are having a meeting this evening, and we want to understand what it's about and how we can help to support it. So I was really excited about that, and and really gave them a good explanation of where we were in the process and how important it was. And Cajun, among with other of our LCIA members, showed up and even came up to the microphone and spoke in favor of the project. So. Y'all all know the ripple effect of these types of projects. It's a pretty big multiplier, and we need all of our contractor partners to really be involved in that process and understanding it and supporting it for us. So we appreciated your involvement in our process. So, I think Roman and Paul talked a lot about the competition for our projects. 30 years ago, it was very regional, and then, maybe it became Louisiana and Texas, and now it truly is global. I mean, everybody is competing for our projects. So it's not just Louisiana or Texas, and what does Texas offer that's better than us? And with the advent of shale gas and low energy costs here in the Gulf Coast, I assure you the rest of the world has figured that out, and they are targeting, they know that we are the competition, and we've seen publications and literature about, we want to be competitive with the Gulf Coast, and some regions, I think Paul and both Roman mentioned in Canada, very aggressive incentive programs. So selfishly, we all like for these projects to be here in our area and all the benefits that we gain from them, but others are really pushing and understand what they have to do to attract these big investments. So it really, ITEP has become a differentiator. I think a lot of the opposition is, well, they're going to come anyway. Well, not when we have other options that are offering some good incentives. So again, I think it's important all of us in the industry understand that, and really, when you get the opportunity like we had last night with our meetings with our elected officials, that we explain to them, that it is a very competitive world, not just the U.S. anymore. So we were, through the process, we were able to successfully get the approval through the Commerce and Industry Board that occurred a couple of weeks ago. So the next step is signed off by the governor. That's the final step in the process, which we're hoping that's going to happen soon. So again, just some tips on what led to our success. Start early, be as open as you can, engage all of our partners in our industry, and be open and honest with what the contribution is going to be and what the exemptions that come with the program are.
I really want to see the success of Louisiana, the success of my particular site down in South Louisiana, and really have come to understand how to get things done in this state, and then it all changed. And I think that's what we are at the Dow Chemical Company most concerned with as we move forward. So Dow, with shale gas, made a major investment in the Gulf Coast. We spent over $6 billion in the Gulf Coast, $2 billion of which was spent right here in Louisiana between my site and the site here in Plaquemine Parish. I'm sorry, Plaquemine. And we did that because we did get these great incentives, and we understood that that was a way that was the best financial decision that we could make going forward. But we're not done as a chemical company. We too want to grow, continue to grow. And I'll speak specifically to the vision of our site. We want to become the premier growth site in the Dow Chemical Company. We have all of the infrastructure that we need. We have a great location. We have people that are ambitious and ready to go. We've delivered results there for the last 4 years that are making a difference in our company. We feel like we have done our part at our site, and the thing that will prevent us from becoming that premier growth site could be the changes that have occurred in ITEP, and not getting those changes reversed and making us competitive with the state of Texas, quite frankly, in my case, for that next major growth and expansion that we so much covet down here in South Louisiana. So the importance of this, and I know my fellow panelists have spoken to many of the details, the importance of it cannot be understated. We will not continue to grow in Louisiana if we cannot be competitive. Companies make their decisions, as we all know, on finances. And if we cannot compete financially, everything else we do doesn't matter. So I would encourage us as we go forward. I think the important thing is, and I don't think anybody in this room probably disagrees with anything we've said up here, so we're preaching to the choir at this point in time. But let me maybe take this to the next level. What can we do? The important thing moving forward is that we educate not ourselves, but our employees, and have them educate their friends, their neighbors, the people they associate with. And not just our employees at the chemical companies, but also our contractors, our suppliers, our customers. And this grassroots effort is the way to make a difference. We need people from all over the state speaking well of ITEP versus what we hear in the news all the time of corporate welfare. We all know what the advantage we bring to the state by building here and growing here. But we have to get that message out to everybody, and we have to be speaking well of it going forward, because we need these changes to be made. We need to be a strong voice, and when we are, I think we have a great opportunity. Everything else, like I said, is in Louisiana. We're ready to go. We just need to get our state to join us in helping us grow.
What changes would you like to see happen?
Well, I think we'd like to see them probably go back to 100%, but make some certainty in there. For example, have a system set up to where you get approval at the state level, and then the locals know exactly what they can do. They go up or down on what the state recommends.
What we would like to see happen is that the uncertainty be addressed, which to some extent we believe that the new rules being proposed right now are going in the right direction. However, on the magnitude of the incentives, we believe that it is not competitive with what other states do offer, and therefore is not going to be able to attract companies and projects here.
We talked about the fact that the legislature is facing the fiscal cliff with the new budget year starting July the 1st, and the fact that they're about $1.5 billion less in terms of taxes that they were temporary and they're going off the rolls, and they're going to have to deal with that budget. And of course, we talked about the fact that they, at the end of the day, are probably going to end up having to do something in continuing part of the fifth penny of the sales tax to get immediate revenue to make up that $600 or so million shortfall. We also talked about the fact that the subject of a constitutional convention is not going to go away. It will be one of the primary campaign discussions as everybody campaigns for both the legislature and statewide offices coming up. And although we don't know what's going to happen in the current session with the constitutional convention vote, it's not going to be something that goes to the back pages. It will continue front page. And the fact that, generally speaking, we have major elections coming up in a couple of years, and with term limits, a lot of the legislators that we historically have talked to and discussed our issues with will be leaving, and that we need to educate ourselves about the candidates and be prepared for the election cycle.
My favorite things that I do like to tell people about that often goes untold or unrecognized is despite the fact, or I shouldn't say despite the fact, because of perhaps our population has increased, our GDP has increased, our energy uses across the United States have increased. Even with all of that wonderful news happening, our ozone levels across the United States have still dropped by 22%. That's great. That is something we should be sharing with people. That is a good news story to tout, and not just around Louisiana or around Region 6, but around the country and certainly around the world. I think it's a prime example of how when industry and the federal government work together collaboratively, where y'all help us push the envelope, you bring new technologies to the table, we can do away with that false narrative of you either have a robust economy or you either have a clean environment. That's not the case. You get both, and I would argue that the stronger our economy, the better and faster environmental gains we make, because we're putting more money into technology, we're putting more money into research to really move the ball forward. I was here to talk to everybody about Administrator Pruitt's 3 priority goals, which are namely, first and foremost, that we get back to basics, really kind of refocus the EPA's mission back again on clean air, clean water, the safe disposal of waste, remediation of land, Number two, really focusing on that bedrock principle of cooperative federalism, working very closely with the states, having that level of shared accountability and shared responsibility, and making sure that we really get back to that. And then third, and probably most importantly, rule of law and process, making sure that our processes are open, transparent, they're fair, folks know what they can expect from us, and that everything that we do is, grounded in the rule of law and robust science.
One of the big issues is the repeal and reduction of regulations, particularly as they affect the chemical industry here in Louisiana. Tell us about that.
Well, we want to make sure that we're working very closely with the state of Louisiana, with industry, with communities, to make sure that as we move forward in terms of repealing outdated or outmoded regulations, that we're doing so in a smart way, again, that are legally sound, scientifically robust, but making sure that we really get caught up with where we need to be, and that we are being more nimble and more accountable, while still ensuring that we're seeing those meaningful and quantifiable environmental gains, but in a way that's also economically feasible and responsible.
The chemical industry, it's a capital-intensive industry. The other big thing about it is that when you look at the impact that we have, we get large investments, the ripple effect is unbelievable. For example, you take companies where you have most of the chemical industry, those are the richest parishes in the state. So they spur a lot of economic development.
First and foremost, I think what's important to remember is the weight of the chemical industry, and certainly in the direct jobs that it creates, and the value in the tax contribution, but also all of the indirect jobs, as well as the construction jobs when there is a new project, and all of the services and the community impact that it does have.
Well, I think it's been positive. People are concerned about it, and they're concerned enough to be here, and they're concerned enough to take action, and that's what we're going to need. We're going to need people talking to elected officials, talking to the local communities, and saying, hey, this is what this means to us as a community, the jobs, and then the overall reinvestment in terms of other businesses that benefit from it.
If people have questions like more information, what should they do?
Well, what you should do is go to LCA.org, and that's our webpage, and we'll have all this information up on our website. So it's LCA.org, and you can find it right there on our webpage.